Rational Fasting, Regeneration Diet, and Natural Cure for All Diseases by Arnold Ehret. Audiobook edition edited by David DeAngelis, 2017. Narrated by Tom Chandler. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. The Common Fundamental Cause in the Nature of Diseases. All the phases of the process of development of the medical science, including those of the earliest periods of civilization, have, in their way of understanding, the causal nature of diseases that one thing in common, that the diseases, owing to external causes, enter into the human body and thus, by force of a necessary, or at least unavoidable law, disturb it in its existence, cause it pain, and at last destroy it. Even modern medical science, no matter how scientifically enlightened it pretends to be, has not quite turned away from this basic note of demoniac interpretation. In fact, the most modern achievement, bacteriology, rejoices over every newly discovered bacillus as a further addition to the army of beings whose accepted task is to endanger the life of man. Looking at it from a philosophical standpoint, this interpretation differs from the medieval superstition and the period of fetishism only in the supplemental name. Formerly it was an evil spirit, which imagination went so far as to believe in satanic personages. Now this same dangerous monster is a microscopically visible being whose existence has been proven beyond any doubt. The matter, it is true, has still a great drawback in the so-called disposition, a fine word, but what we are really to understand by it, nobody has ever told us. All the tests on animals with their symptom reactions do not prove anything sure because these occur only by means of injection into the blood circulation and never by introduction into the digestive channel through the mouth. There is something true in the conception of external invasion of a disease, as well as in heredity. However, not in the sense that the invader is a spirit, demon, hostile to life, or a microscopic being, bacillus. But all diseases, without exception, even the hereditary, are caused, disregarding a few other unhygienic causes, by biologically wrong, unnatural food, and by each ounce of overnourishment only and exclusively. First of all, I maintain that in all diseases without exception, there exists a tendency by the organism to secrete mucus, and in case of a more advanced stage, pus, or decomposed blood. Of course, every healthy organism must also contain a certain mucus, lymph, a fatty substance of the bowels, etc., of a mucus nature. Every expert will admit this in all catarrhalic cases, from a harmless cold in the nose to inflammation of the lungs and consumption, as well as in epilepsy, attacks showing froth at the mouth, mucus. Where this secretion of mucus does not show freely and openly, as in cases of ear, eye, skin, or stomach trouble, heart disease, rheumatism, gout, etc., even in all degrees of insanity, is mucus the main factor of the illness, the natural secretive organs not being able to cope with it any longer, the mucus entering the blood and causing at the respective spot where the vessel system is probably contracted owing to an overcooling, cold, etc., heat, inflammation, pain, fever. We need only to give a patient of any kind nothing but mucusless food, for instance, fruit, or even nothing but water or lemonade. We then find that the entire digestive energy, freed for the first time throws itself upon the mucous matters accumulated since childhood and frequently hardened, as well as on the pathologic beds formed therefrom. And the result? With unconditional certainty, this mucus, which I mark as the common, basic, and main cause of all diseases, will appear in the urine and in the excrements. If the disease is already somewhat advanced, so that in some spot, even in the innermost interior, there have appeared pathologic beds, i.e. decomposed cellular tissues, then pus is also being excreted. As soon as the introduction of mucus by means of artificial food, fat meat, bread, potatoes, farinaceous products, rice milk, etc., ceases, the blood circulation attacks the mucus and the pus of the body themselves and secretes them through the urine, and in the case of heavily infected bodies, even through all the openings at their command, as well as through the mucous membranes. If potatoes, grain meal, rice, or the respective meat materials are being boiled long enough, we receive a jelly-like slime mucus or paste used by bookbinders and carpenters. This mucus substance soon becomes sour, ferments, and forms a bed for fungi, molds, and bacilli. In the digestion, which is nothing else but a boiling, a combustion, this slime or paste is being secreted in the same manner, for the blood can only use the ex-digested sugar transformed from starch. The secreted matter, the superfluous product, i.e. this paste or slime, is a foreign matter to the body and is being completely excreted in the beginning. It is, therefore, easy to understand that in the course of life, the intestines and the stomach are gradually being pasted and slimed up to such an extent that this paste of floral and this slime of faunal origin turn into fermentation, clog up the blood vessels, and finally decompose the stagnating blood. If figs, dates, or grapes are boiled down thick enough, we also receive a pap, which, however, does not turn to fermentation and never secretes slime, and which nobody calls slime, but which is called syrup. Fruit sugar, the most important thing for the blood, is also sticky, it is true, but is being completely used up by the body as the highest form of fuel, and leaves for excretion only traces of cellulose, which, not being sticky, is promptly excreted and does not ferment. Boiled down sugar, owing to its resistance against fermentation, is even used for the preservation of food. Each healthy or sick person deposits on the tongue a stinking mucus as soon as he reduces his food or fasts. This occurs also on the mucous membrane of the stomach, of which the tongue is an exact copy. In the first stool after the fasting, this mucus makes its appearance. I recommend to the physicians and searchers to test my claims by way of experiments which alone are entitled to real scientific recognition. The experiment, the question put to nature, is the basis of all natural science and reveals the infallible truth, no matter whether it is stated by me or somebody else. Furthermore, I recommend to those who are brave enough to test on their own bodies the following experiments which I undertook on mine. They will receive the same answer from nature, i.e., from their organisms, provided that the latter be sound in my sense. Exact, to a certain degree, reacts only the clean, sound, mucusless organism. After a 2 years strict fruit diet with intercalated fasting cures, I had attained a degree of health which is simply not imaginable nowadays, and which allowed of my making the following experiments. With a knife, I made an incision in my lower arm, There was no flow of blood as it thickened instantaneously, closing up of the wound, no inflammation, no pain, no mucus and pus, healed up in 3 days, blood crust thrown off. Later, with vegetaric food including mucus formants, starch food, but without eggs and milk. The wound bled a little, caused some pain and pus slightly, a light inflammation, complete healing only after some time. After that, the same wounding with meat food and some alcohol. Longer bleeding, the blood of a light color, red and thin, inflammation, pain, pussing for several days, and healing only after a 2 days fasting. I have offered myself, of course in vain, to the Prussian Ministry of War for a repetition of this experiment. Why is it that the wounds of the Japanese healed much quicker and better in the Russo-Japanese War as those of the meat and brandy Russians? Has nobody for 2,000 years ever thought it over why the opening of the artery and even the poison cup could not kill Seneca after he had despised meat and fasted in prison? It is said that even before that, Seneca fed on nothing but fruit and water. All disease is, finally, nothing else but a clogging up of the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries, by mucus. Nobody will want to clean the water conduit of a city, a pipe system, which is fed with soiled water by a pump, the filters of which are clogged up, without having the water supply shut off during the cleaning process. If the conduit supplies the entire city, or a portion of it, with unclean water, or if even the smallest branch pipes are clogged up, there is no man in the world who would repair or improve that respective spot. Everybody thinks at once of the central, of the tank and the filters, and these, together with the pumping machine, can be cleaned only as long as the water supply is shut off. I am the Lord, thy physician, English and modern. Nature alone heals, cleans, unmucuses, best and infallibly sure, but only if the supply, or at least the mucus supply, is stopped. Each physiological machine, man like beast, cleanses itself immediately, dissolves the mucus in the clogged up vessels without stopping short as soon as the supply, of compact food at least, is interrupted. Even in the case of the supposedly healthiest man, this mucus, as already mentioned, then appears in the urine, where it can be seen after cooling off in the proper glass tubes. Whoever denies, ignores, or fights this uniform fact because perhaps it goes against him or is not scientific enough for him, is jointly guilty of the impossibility of the detection of the principal cause of all diseases, and this, in the first place, to his own detriment. Therewith I also uncover the last secret of consumption. Or does anybody believe that this enormous quantity of mucus thrown off by a patient stricken with tuberculosis for years and years emanates only from the lung itself? Just because this patient is then almost forcibly fed on mucus, pap, milk, fat meats, the mucus can never cease until the lung itself decays and the bacilli make their appearance when death becomes inevitable. The mystery of the bacilli is solved simply thus. The gradual clogging up by mucus of the blood vessels leads to decomposition, to fermentation of these mucus products and boiled dead food residues. These decay partially in the living body, pussy abscesses, cancer, tuberculosis, syphilis, lupus, etc. Now everybody knows that meat, cheese, and all organic matter will again germinate, put forth bacilli during the process of decomposition. It is for this reason that these germs appear and are detectable only in the more advanced stage of the disease, when, however, they are not the cause, but the product of the disease, and disease furthering only insofar as the decomposition, for instance of the lung, is being hastened by them because the excretions of the bacilli, their toxins, act poisoning. If it be correct that bacilli infect from the exterior, then it is nothing but the mucus which makes possible their activity and furnishes the proper soil, the disposition. As already said, I have repeatedly, once for 2 years, lived mucusless, i.e. on fruit exclusively. I was no longer in need of a handkerchief, which product of civilization I hardly need even up to this day. Has anyone ever seen a healthy animal living in freedom to expectorate or to blow its nose? A chronic inflammation of the kidneys, considered deadly, which I was stricken with, was not only healed, but I am enjoying a degree of health and efficiency which by far surpasses even that of my healthiest youth. I want to see the man who, being sick to death at 31, can run without a stop for 2 hours and a quarter, or make an endurance march of 56 hours duration 8 years later. With this mucus theory, well confirmed by my numerous experiments, there is for the first time put up a thorough etiologic, i.e., a cause-defining uniform conception of all diseases. If naturopathy here and there mentions certain affections of the blood as being the fundamental cause of all disease, this theory has proved insufficient because the food had been prescribed to be meatless, or its contents of meat greatly reduced, at the same time, however, introducing so much the more mucus by means of bread, pap, milk, butter, eggs, cheese, and farinaceous stuffs, especially starch food. That is the reason why most of the vegetarians, in spite of their lauded bill of fare, are not healthy just the same. I myself was such a much and mucus eater for several years. If a considerable number of the vegetarians do not soon advance towards the only natural food, the fruit diet, or at least return to eating little, there will be great danger of the shallowing down of vegetarianism. Not because the principle of no meat eating is bad, but because the healthful effects of the existing vegetaric nourishment are so inferior. The representatives of the vegetarian movement are still trying to prove what man is in need of as regards boiled meals, because they themselves, as well as all the amateurs in this field, have a fundamentally wrong conception of the fruit diet as a healing remedy and go at it in a wrong way. The hobby of the vegetaric propaganda is the argument that man is not a carnivore, and that, therefore, the eating of meat is unnatural. With perfect right, says the opponent, that the eating of meat is just as natural as that of bread, cabbage, milk, cheese, etc. Professor V. Bunji has reproached the vegetarians for inconsequence more than a decade ago, and he is right. It is surely theoretically correct that man was a mere fruit eater in times gone by, and biologically correct that he can be it even today. Or can the horse sense of man not conceive, without any proofs and directly, of the fact that man, before becoming a hunter, lived on fruits only? I even maintain that he did live in absolute health, beauty, and strength, without pain and grief, just the way the Bible says. Fruit only, the sole mucus-less food, is natural. Everything prepared by man, or supposedly improved by him, is evil. The arguments regarding fruit are scientifically exact. In an apple or a banana, for instance, is everything contained what man needs. Man is so perfect that he can live on one kind of fruit only, at least for quite some time. This, however, need not necessarily be coconut or cabacan, but a self-evident truth preached by nature must not be discarded just because nobody has been able to apply it in practice on account of civilizational considerations. From fruit only, one becomes, first of all, ill, i.e. cleansed. This cleansing process, however, is better to undergo at home and not in the tropics. No man would have ever believed me that it is possible to live without food for 126 days, in which 49 at a stretch, during 14 months. Now I have done it, and yet this truth is not being understood. Hitherto I say and teach only that fruit is the most natural healing remedy. Whether my calculation is correct will be proven by the next epidemic. I take, however, this opportunity to uncover the reasons why the self-evident is not believed in. When in the previous century somebody talked about telephoning from Berlin to Paris, everybody laughed because there had never been such a thing. Natural food is not being believed in anymore because almost nobody practices it and, being a man of civilization, cannot easily practice it. It must also be considered that contra-interests fear that the prices of the other artificial foodstuffs may drop, and others fear that the food physiology may receive a shock and that the physicians become unnecessary. But it is just this fasting and fruit cure which requires very strict observation and instruction. Therefore, more doctors and less patients who, however, will gladly pay more if they get well. Thus the social question regarding doctors is solved, assertion already made by me publicly in Zurich several years ago. Almost all fasting attempts fail on account of the ignorance of the fact that with the beginning of mucusless diet, the old mucus is being excreted so much more forcibly until that person is absolutely clean and healthy. Thus, the seemingly most healthy person has first to pass through a condition of sickness, cleansing, or to go through an intermediate stage of illness to a higher level of health. This is the great cliff around which so very few vegetarians have failed to go, discarding the highest truth, just like the mass of people is doing. I have proven this here in the Vegetarshivarte competently on the basis of experiments and facts, and refuted the greatest objection, that of undernourishment, by an actual fasting experiment of 49 days with preceding fruit diet. My state of health was only improved by this radical excretion of mucus, disregarding a few unhygienic circumstances during the test. I received numerous letters of appreciation, especially from the educated classes. The mass of the adherents of vegetarianism, mucuses, gaily ahead. Vegetarianism has to show representatives of both sexes who do not differ by anything from Munich beer stomachs, a consequence of the daily stuffing up with mucus food of all kinds. Contrasting herewith, it can only be said that the poisons, so called by them, meat, alcohol, coffee, and tobacco, are in the long run comparatively harmless, as long as they are used moderately. In order to avoid misunderstanding on the part of teetotalers and vegetarians, I must insert here a few explanations. Meat is not a foodstuff, but only a stimulant which ferments, decays in the stomach. The process of decay, however, does not begin in the stomach, but at once after the slaughtering. This has already been proven on living persons by Professor Dr. S. Graham, and I complete this fact by saying that meat acts as a stimulant just by means of these poisons of decay, and therefore is being regarded as a strengthening foodstuff. Or is there anyone who can show me chemico-physiologically that the albumin molecule going through the process of decay is being newly reformed in the stomach and celebrates its resurrection in some muscle of the human body? Exactly like alcohol, the meat acts in the beginning delusively, as if stimulating strength and energy, until the entire organism is penetrated by it and the breakdown inevitable. All the other stimulants act likewise. The fundamental evil of all non-vegetaric forms of diet consists always in the overeating of meat, as it is the origin of all the other evils, especially of the craving for alcohol. If fruit is eaten almost exclusively, the eagerness for cup or glass loses itself to chastise itself against it, simply because meat produces the demon thirst. Alcohol is a proven kind of antidote for meat, and the gourmand of the big city, who eats almost nothing but meat, must therefore have wines, mocha, and Havana in order to at least in some way counteract the heavy meat poisoning. It is a well-known fact that, after an opulent dinner, one feels decidedly fresher, physically and mentally, if the stimulants, poisonous in themselves, are taken moderately, than to stuff oneself full with the good eating to the very fatigue. I absolutely declare war on meat and alcohol. Through fruit and moderate eating, these great evils are radically diminished. But whoever finds it impossible to entirely give up meat and alcohol is, if he takes them moderately, still far ahead of the vegetaric much-eater. The American Fletcher proves this most evidently by his tremendous success, and his secret is explained by my experiments, which show that a person becomes most efficient and develops best in his health if he eats as little as possible. Are not the oldest people, as a rule, the poorest? Have not the greatest discoverers and inventors sprung from poverty, i.e., been little eaters? Were not the greatest of mankind, the prophets, founders of religions, etc., ascetics? Is that culture, to live in Berlin, dining excellently thrice a day, and is that social progress that each working man eats 5 times a day and then pumps himself full with beer at night? If the sick organism can regenerate by eating nothing, I think the logical consequence is that a healthy organism needs but little food in order to remain healthy, strong, and persevering. All the so-called miracles of the saints have their only origin in ascetics and are today impossible, but for the reason that, although much praying is done, no fasting is adhered to. This is the only solution of this quarrel. We have no more miracles because we have no more saints, i.e., sanctified and healed by ascetics and fastings. The saints were self-shining, expressed in modern language, medial or radioactive, but only because through ascetics they were godly healthy, and not by special grace. I just wish to mention here that I myself have succeeded in visible electric affluences, but only by external and internal sun energies, sun baths, and good from the sun kitchen fruit. The entire world is quarreling now regarding these questions and miracles. And here is the solution on the basis of experiments which everybody can repeat, if he is brave enough. But it is apparently easier to write books, preach, and pray, or to say that I am an exception. This is true, but only as far as pluck and understanding are concerned. Physiologically, all men are equal, and whoever cannot be moderate may learn it from me if he wishes to be a real searcher. If a man eats little and is healthy, he can digest for quite a length of time the most absurd food, meat and starch mucus, i.e., he can again excrete it. Naturally, he becomes and remains still more perfect and clean if he eats but little fruit, and of this he needs the least because it is the most perfect food. This eternal truth, by natural law, men of today will and cannot admit, and has a well-founded fear of it, because he is built up of dead, boiled foods, and his cells die off and are excreted as soon as he takes sunbaths, fasts, or eats the living cells of fruit. But this cure must be done with the greatest care. Medicine has, as long as this is possible, to protect man from a breakdown of his cells, to hold him above water, only to make him then die of the disease so much more promptly and quickly, which today is fervently wished for. Vegetarianism cannot deny that the consumers of meat and alcohol can also boast of much health and great deeds and high age, but taken individually and as a people, only so long as but little is eaten and no overnourishment caused. The too much takes less revenge in case of meat eating because meat contains proportionally less mucus than the starch-containing, i.e., mucus, vegetaric food, and the celebrated vegetaric dinners with so and so many dishes daily. I myself have not cared for many years for any meals. I eat only when I have appetite, and then so little that it does not cause any harmful effect, if, on account of an experiment, I am obliged to eat something which in itself is not entirely free from objection. If the most serious diseases can be cured by fasting, which has been proven in thousands of cases, and if by this way of living one gets even stronger, if it is done right, then the most energetic food, the fruit, should cause one so much the more to become strong and healthy. This has been also scientifically proven by the merited Dr. Bircher. It is true, the science of cure by nature has recognized the fact that something must get out of the sick organism, but it has so far ascribed the greatest importance to physical stimulations and ignored entirely the real natural moment of the process of cure, the abstaining from food and the fruit diet, or at least only tried to substitute it by an alcohol and meatless diet. This does not mean much in the face of my mucus theory. And what is this mucusless alcohol not accused of today? It will soon be made the scapegoat of all diseases, because here and there is found a depraved one who, consuming it in enormous quantities, ends in delirium. Just compel a drinker to fast a few days, or to eat nothing but fruit. I can bet that the best glass of beer will have lost its taste for him. This shows that the entire civilized mess, from beefsteak down to the apparently harmless oatmeals, creates the desire for these detested antidotes: alcohol, coffee, tea, tobacco. Why? Because much eating paralyzes, and only the use of stimulants restores. Here is the true and fundamental reason for the increase of alcohol consumption: the overnourishment, especially with meat. Professor Dr. Graham says in his Physiology of Nourishment, quote, "A drinker can reach a high age, a glutton never." This is true because the acute alcohol, acting as a stimulant, especially the modern beer, is less harmful in the long run than the chronic stuffing up of the digestive channel with mucus food. I now ask, what appeals more to reason? To wipe out the masses of mucus piled up since childhood and having infected the cellular tissues of the body right there, symptoms of illness, by sweating, baths, artificial cold or nipe cures, massage, sport, etc., at the expense of vitality, especially of the heart, and the duration of life? Or simply to stop the further supply of mucus? Or is there anybody who wants to prove to me that even the best chef or confectioner is capable of producing something better than an apple, a grape, or banana? If nourishment by mucus and overeating is the true fundamental cause of all diseases without exception, which I can prove to anybody on his own body, then there can exist but one natural remedy, i.e., fasting and fruit diet. That every animal fasts in case of even the slightest uneasiness is a well-known fact, and to culture, and thanks to man feeding them, have lost their sharp instinct for the right kind of food and the natural hours of feeding, and therewith their proper state of health and acuteness of sense, they will, nevertheless, when sick, accept only the most necessary food. They fast themselves back to health. Poor sick man, however, must under no circumstances live on short rations for more than 1 or 2 days for fear that he may lose strength. Already have physicians called the fasting wonder cures, cure of the uncured, cure of all cures, etc. Certain charlatans have brought this infallible, but at the same time dangerous cure to discredit. I have done in fasting the most significant thing in centuries. 49 days world record. See Vegestarschwarte, 1909, Book 19, 20, 22, 1910, Book 1 and 2. Furthermore, I am the only one who combines this cure with systematically and individually adapted fruit diet, which makes it astonishingly easier and absolutely harmless. We are therefore undoubtedly put in a position to heal diseases which the school medicine designates as incurable. On the basis of my detection that this mucus coming from cultured food is the fundamental cause and main factor in the nature of all diseases, symptoms of age, obesity, falling out of the hair, wrinkles, weakness of nerves and memory, etc., there is justified hope for the creation of a new phase of development of the progressive healing methods and biological medicine. Already Hippocrates had uniformly recognized the disease material for all diseases. Professor Jaeger has defined the common as stench, but not discovered the source of this bad smell. Dr. Laumann and other representatives of the physical dietetic tendency, especially Kuhn, come onto the tracks of this common foreign matter. But all of them did not show, recognize, or prove by experiment that it is just this mucus of culture food which loads up our organism from very childhood and attacks it at a certain degree of fermentations, forms pathologic beds, i.e. decomposes the cellular tissues of the body itself into pus and decay. It is being mobilized in case of casual colds or high temperatures, etc., and produces, in its tendency to leave the body, symptoms of abnormal functions, which hitherto have been regarded as the disease itself. It is therefore for the first time possible to define what is meant by disposition. The more the mucus, bad mother's milk and all its substitutes, is being administered from childhood on, or the less this mucus is being excreted, owing to hereditary weakness, through the organs made to perform this task, the greater is the inclination to catch cold, fever, to freeze, to admit parasites, to get sick, and to grow old. Very likely, by this the veil has been lifted from the secret which hitherto has always surrounded the nature of the white corpuscles. I believe that here, as in many other cases, we have to do with an error of the medical science. The bacteria throw themselves upon the white largest extent of this mucus denounced by me. Are not the bacteria being bred on this mucus by the millions outside of the organism? On potatoes, broth, gelatin, i.e. on mucus, i.e. nitrogenous, vegetable, or animal substances consisting of an alkalically reacting fluid containing granulated cells of the appearance of white blood corpuscles. Perhaps in an entirely healthy condition, the so-called mucous membrane should not at all be white, slimy, but clean and red, like on animals. Perhaps this corpse mucus is even the cause of the paleness of the white race? Pale face, corpse color. With this mucus theory to be confirmed by experiment, the specter disease has been finally deprived of its demoniac mask. He who believes me can heal not only himself, if everything else fails, but we have for the first time been given the means to radically prevent disease and to make it definitively impossible. Even the dream of lasting youth and beauty is now about to become true The animal, and especially the human organism, is, from a mechanical standpoint, a complicated tube system of blood vessels with air gas impetus by means of the lungs, in which the blood fluid is constantly kept moving and regulated by the heart as a valve. The decomposition of the air gas is accomplished by each breath in the lungs, separating of the air into oxygen and nitrogen. Thus the blood is constantly kept moving, and the human body does its service incredibly long without fatigue. Let nobody come to me with the silly excuse of the daily experience of the absolutely natural compulsion of much eating, prescribed for working men, etc., before it has not been experienced by such complainant, how long it is possible to work or march without fatigue after fasting or fruit food. Fatigue is in the first place a reducing of strength by too much digestion work. Secondly, a clogging up of the heated and consequently narrowed down blood vessels. And thirdly, a self- and re-poisoning through the excretion of mucus during the motion. All organic substances of animal origin excrete cyan groups in their decomposition, which the chemist Hensel has defined as bacilli proper. The air is not only the highest and most perfect operating material of the human body, but simultaneously the first element for the erection, repair, substitute, and very likely the animal organism derives nitrogen also from the air. On certain caterpillars, an increase of weight through air alone has been stated. Chapter 2. Remedies for the removal of the common fundamental cause of disease and the prevention of their reoccurrence. After having told my readers the dread and horror of being sick or getting sick in the previous chapter, it befits me to show them the means and ways, as far as this, commonly speaking, is possible, how to successfully encounter mucus poisoning, this greatest foe of health. I have already mentioned that each patient requires individual treatment, in form of verbal as well as written advices, the only after detailed reports from the patients. I have already succeeded in numerous and serious cases to exert my helping and healing knowledge. Here I wish to show 3 means and ways which can produce a beneficial change. 1. The shortest and best way is the fasting so much talked about in this magazine. It cuts short the life of the grim misdoer in our body and causes him to flee, and he leaves us faster with fright and terror. Healthy people can submit themselves to a fasting cure without any further ceremony. It goes without saying that they must fast reasonably and be responsible for it, that they do not cause dangerous overexertions during the fasting period by demanding of themselves physical or mental performances which they could not live up to or even at full fare. I insert here a precautionary measure which must be observed in all fasting cures: the complete emptying of the bowels at the beginning of the fasting by a harmless purgative, or by a syringe, or by both. It lies in the nature of the thing that he who fasts must not be bothered by gas or decomposing matter which form from the excrements remaining in the bowels. It suffices that the mucus during the excretion gives him enough trouble, as already stated. Who does not care to do a more prolonged fasting, although he is healthy, may try a short one. Even a fasting of 36 hours, weekly 1 or 2 times, acts in the long run very favorably. It is best to start by leaving off the supper and taking a syringe instead. Then, in case of a 36 hours fasting, nothing is taken until the morning after the next, and then nothing but fruits for breakfast. The eating of fruits is necessary after each fasting, as the juices of the fruits cause a moving of the mucous masses which have loosened. In the case of sick and old people, this treatment must be carefully individualized. One arrives at this end, however, very much quicker if a longer fasting is done in the way described. For instance, 3 days, and then keeps an after-fasting cure. That is, not to eat anything for 3 days and drink only citron lemonade in single gulps as may become necessary, to begin on the 4th day with some fruits, at the close of the 4th day take a thorough syringe, and then add more fruit from day to day until about the 7th day of the after cure, the normal quantity of fruit diet in the proper composition and selection has been reached. The fasting, however, can be extended for weeks by healthy persons and by those whose occupation permits of their spending their time in bed in case of difficult excretions of mucus. Nobody should mind, then, the so-called bad looks or the decrease in weight. The body fasts itself into health, despite such miserable complexion, and soon the cheeks will be adorned by a healthy, fresh red, and the weight is also restored very soon after the fasting to its normal standard. After a fasting, the body reacts on every ounce of food. Very moderate and frequently fasting people have a very fine, inspirited expression of the face. It is said that Pope Leo XIII, this great faster and life artist, had a very clear, almost transparent complexion. In this connection, I wish to call attention to another point, already mentioned elsewhere. The success of the fasting depends upon it to a great extent. The fasting person must not unnecessarily become depressed or ill-humored. The one finds relief in the disagreeable moments by complete rest, the other by quick and decided work, especially in light and mechanical occupation. When the body has been dismucused, disslimed, and dispasted, then it is the sacred duty of the person who has regained health to keep up the reclaimed highest earthly happiness and to guard it by means of the correct food. On this, a few short remarks in the following paragraphs. 2. He who cannot fast, because of considerations of advanced lung or heart trouble, for instance, may at least see to it that the further accumulation of mucus be cut short by refraining from pronounced mucus formers, especially from all flour, cake, rice, potato dishes, from boiled milk, cheese, meat, etc. Whoever cannot miss bread entirely must eat black or white bread only toasted. By toasting, the bread loses much of its harmfulness, as the mucus substances are being partly destroyed. The eating of toasted bread has the further advantage that not much can be eaten of it. It cannot be devoured as wild beasts do, and the necessary chewing will fatigue even the most greedy gums. Whoever cannot bite the toasted bread, on account of bad teeth, may suck on it until it dissolves, a splendid way to restore declined strength. Whoever cannot miss potatoes should eat them only baked. What then remains for nutritious food, after I am to give up all albuminous food, like dried peas, lentils, beans, as little as possible? Thus, many a reader will ask with a sigh. As to the value of meat, I have set forth my views elsewhere. The slight requirements in albumin are fully covered by sugary fruits. The banana, the nuts, combined with a few figs or dates, are first-class muscle formers and strength givers. The vegetables, cut small and made into salads, the salads themselves, prepared with oil and plenty of lemon, and all the splendid fruits and berries, including those of the South, are worthy of being served at the tables of gods. And when springtime comes, and last season's fruits, especially apples, are on the decline, and the new vegetables not yet ready, does not Mother Nature help us out abundantly with oranges from the South? Will the aroma and wealth of these splendid products of nature not induce man to eventually become a fruit eater entirely? It is not possible for me to go into the question of food and its effects exhaustively in this book. For healthy people, these statements may suffice. For sick people, I give special prescriptions according to their state of health. It may be mentioned that non-fasters and people easily succumbing to illness may at least insert the morning's fasting. It would be better for everybody not to eat anything before 10 o'clock, and then nothing but fruits. The reward for this little chastising will certainly show itself if the latter be kept up unfailingly. 3. Now just one more word to those who think it impossible to give up the usual mucus food, meat, etc. To these poor ones, I also give the advice to chew your food, and each bite thoroughly, as per the American Fletcher, and one word, to Fletcherize. Not that the fruit eaters should not do this, certainly, but the poison, i.e. mucus eaters, must do so especially, if they do not wish to sink into their graves all too soon. The strong secretion of saliva in slow chewing decreases the formation of mucus and prevents the overeating. Of course, this class of people cannot quite achieve in health and strength, keep up of youth and perseverance, physical and mental efficiency, what can be achieved by the faster and fruit eater. Once man is healthy in my sense of the word, by fasting and fruit diet, i.e. free from mucus, slime, and germ, and if he stays with the fruit diet, he, of course, need not fast any longer, and only then he will find a pleasure in eating which he never dreamt of before. Only in this will man find the way to happiness, harmony, and the solution of all questions, especially the social questions, as only through this he can become want-free and get, quote, nearest to divinity, as per Socrates. Chapter 3. The fundamental cause of growing old and ugly, of the falling out and getting gray of the hair. The means founded in nature for maintenance of youth and beauty. Following the previous general arguments to the effect that mucus is the main cause of disease and aging, there is only left to show in particular, and on the various organs, in how far the mucus of culture food acts beauty-hindering in the construction of the human body, and produces symptoms of ugliness and age. If according to paradisic primary laws, the lungs and skin would be given nothing but pure air and sun electricity, and the stomach and bowels nothing but sun food, i.e. fruits, which are being digested almost without rest, secreting only mucus, paste, and germless cellulose, there seems to be no reason why the tube system of the human body should become defect, weaken, age, and finally break down entirely. Instead of the living energy cells of the fruit, one eats killed food, which biologically is meant for beasts of prey, i.e., food chemically changed by air oxidation, decay, dead boiled and robbed of its energy. Mucus accumulates especially in the heating channel, stomach and bowels, of this tube machine, and slowly clogs up the channel and filters glands. The sum total of this defilement causes chronic defects, makes people grow old, and is the main factor in the nature of all diseases. Growing old, therefore, is a latent disease, i.e. a slow but constantly increasing disturbance in the operation of the motor of life. The chemistry of victuals gives the most reliable proof that deformity and decomposition have their source mainly in the lack of minerals in boiled culture food. If human ugliness is such, lost beauty and symptoms of growing old can be made accounted for by wrong nourishment, then the theory of beauty and rejuvenation leads to a dietetic cure and a respective improvement of nourishment. But inasmuch as beauty, especially human beauty, cannot be absolutely defined, because everybody has a different taste, I can limit myself only to the main standards of aesthetic demands. The white corpse color of the light and sunless man of culture cannot be called beautiful, and emanates mainly from the white corpse color of the dead-bodied, wrong food. What wonderful color a man can get who feeds on bleeding grapes, cherries, and oranges, and who takes systematically air and sun baths, cannot be imagined by the modern artists of plein air painting. Mucus, and at the same time lack of earthy matter, means as much as lack of color. Just compare the food tables of Dr. Koenig, and you will find that the mucusless food, the fruit, and the vegetables occupy the first place as regards their contents of necessary earthy matter, especially lime. The size of a person, i.e., the circumference of the skeleton, depends, for instance, mainly on the amount of lime contained in the food. The Japanese want to increase the size of their race by meat, thereby from bad to worse. All the pining away of size, deformities of the bones, and especially the decay of the teeth is due to lack of lime. Through the boiling of milk and vegetables, the lime is being eliminated. The enormous poorness in mineral culture food, especially of the meat as compared with fruit, is responsible for the coming of a toothless human race, as predicted even by physicians, and which is not merely a phantom of imagination. And instead of by fruit, these stuffs are being substituted by an organic preparation. The human organism does not assimilate one single atom mineral substance which has not transmigrated into a plant or fruit, i.e., which has not become organic. The most modern disfigurement, the obesity, has clouded up our aesthetic feelings in this regard so much that we even do not know any longer the limit of the normal. I do not even consider the bred man of muscles of classic type beautiful and as a standard for the ideal type of Germanic and Aryan races. Weight, shape, and especially circumference of body are too great. Every accumulation of fat is pathologic, and in this measure unaesthetic. No animal living in freedom is upholstered with fat, like so many men. The reason is only too much food and too much fluid. Relaxation and clogging up of the entire system of vessels are the natural consequences. Grape sugar of the fruits and their nutritive salts are the right sources for a firm muscle substance by which a body, disfattened and dismucused by fasting, can be quickly rebuilt. The stoutness of face and body are dangerously on the increase. It is ugly and certainly pathologic. It is a curious fact that this accumulation of fat is considered not only beautiful, but even a sign of overabundant health, while the daily experience teaches that the slim, permanently youthful type is in every respect of a greater force of resistance and generally reaches a higher age. I should like to be shown just one person of 80 or 90 years with such obesity, which today is pronounced beautiful and healthy, and with which it is believed to fatten away tuberculosis. If fat people do not die in their best years through palpitations of the heart, apoplexy, or dropsy, they succumb to a slow emaciating, and the desire for food decreases in spite of all artificial stimulations of the appetite. The skin, especially of the face, having been subjected to extreme tension, becomes foldy and wrinkly. It has lost its youthful elasticity on account of insufficient and unhealthy blood circulation, as well as lack of light and sun. And now this relaxation of the skin is being tried to be prevented by salves and powders externally. The distinction and beauty of the features, the pureness and healthy color of the complexion, the clearness and natural size of the eyes, the charm of the expression, and the color of the lips, age and become ugly to the extent of the expression and the color of the mucus and the bowels, which we have recognized above as the central depot from which all the symptoms of disease, and therefore those of age, are being fed. The beautiful roundness of cheeks, which at the same time increases the size of the nose, is nothing but a clogging up by mucus, which, as is well known, breaks out in case of a cold in the nose. I come now to the most important and most striking symptom of the growing old, the falling out and getting gray of the hair, to which I must devote an entire section, because its appearance generally causes the first and greatest worry and pain over the coming age, and because, hitherto, science has stood baffled in the face of this problem. The modern cutting short of the masculine hair on the head, as well as the alarming expansion and earliness of baldness, have accustomed even an artistical eye so much to this appearance that we no longer become conscious of the fact how seriously the aesthetic and harmonic figure of man is disturbed by this voluntary and involuntary hair decapitation. Man, who is not only intellectual, but also as an aesthetic product of nature, the crown of creation, is being robbed of the splendid crown of his head, the hair. They could be called living skulls, these beardless, colorless, and expressionless heads of today. Just imagine the most beautiful woman with a pate. Where is the man that would not turn away with horror? Or a fashion sport of today hewn in marble. In addition to that, the mustache shaped geometrically and angular, or trimmed off entirely, then the modern clothing which distinguishes itself from that of all the centuries by the greatest insipidity. And this we find beautiful reasons for which the present-day man gets his beard and hair cut down to a minimum length. The lack of beauty, and therewith the unaesthetic appearance of hair and beard, has become so general that in course of time the need of shaving and the use of the millimeter machine have come as a matter of course. In our time of equalization and all leveling, it is preferred, and rightfully so, to cut off these odor and, so to speak, revelation organs of inner man, instead of furnishing by ugly, disheveled, uneven, and hereditary morbid hair a living proof for the descendants theory. Therewith we can understand the maltreatment of the hair. The thought is practically given rise that the getting ugly of one organ or of the entire organism means its inner morbidities, i.e., nature, reveals internal physiological disturbances of an organism through disharmony of shape and color. The seriously ill and dead organisms are its extremes. Doubters in my points of view, and bad nature observers, may here be reminded of the law of exception from the rule. And, as regards man, of the fact that neither hygienically nor aesthetically have we any imagination left of the ideal beauty and health of man living under perfectly natural conditions. If the pleasure in the beautiful is a sentence in the favorable sense, then the displeasure felt by an aesthetic eye in looking up the disharmony of shape and color must include, to a certain degree, the recognition of the pathologic. Let us return to our subject. We know that medical science is powerless as regards baldness, and that cosmetic and chemistry of tonics have failed to produce even a single new hair. I have already called the hair, especially of the human head, the odor organs of the body, which are to conduct away the exhalations of the human body. Everybody knows that sweat is produced first of all on the head and in the armpits, that with this sweat, especially on sick people, is connected a disagreeable odor. Dr. Jaeger calls disease somewhere stench. This, with exceptions of course, seems to me correct insofar as I am able to pronounce, on the basis of many years' observation and experiments, the following fundamental uniform conception of disease. Disease is a fermentation and decay process of body substance or of surplus and unnatural food material, which in course of time has accumulated, especially in the digestive organs, and which makes its appearance in the shape of mucus excretion. That is, it means in the last instance nothing but the chemical decomposition, the decay of cellular albumin. As is well known, this process is accompanied by stench, while nature combines the originating of new life with fragrance, the building of plants. Properly, man in perfect health should exhale fragrance, particularly so with his hair. poets are rightfully comparing man with a flower and speak of the hair fragrance of woman. I therefore recognize in the hair of the human head a very important organ which, aside from protective and warmth-regulating purposes, has a highly interesting and useful destination: to conduct away the exhalations, the odor of healthy and sick people, which reveals to experts and acute noses not only individual qualities, but even certain disclosures as regards the inner state of health or sickness of a man. If the doctors have not by far recognized digestive disturbances with the microscopes and test glasses, there have yet been certain quacks who have been able to state by simple hair diagnosis the stench-producing inner process of decay, the disease. Why, there are numberless people today, still youthful and radiating health, with a breath like that of a sewer, and who are wondering why their hair is falling out. I have now arrived at the vital spot of my researches and observations. First, one more word about the getting gray of the hair. It has been found that in hair which has become gray, the contents of air is increasing, and I am also of the opinion that this air consists probably of stinking gases, or at least is mixed with such. I recommend to a chemist with a strong scent to discover here the sulfurous acid. Then the disappearance of the color of the hair will also have been explained, as it is a well-known fact that sulfur dioxide bleaches organic substances. It now seems to me certain, not only theoretically, but also on the basis of my interesting experiments on my own body, that the principal cause of baldness can only be an internal one. If through these odor tubes, or so to speak, gas chimneys of the head, there must be constantly discharged, stinking, corroding gases, very probably impregnated with sulfur dioxide, instead of natural fragrant odors, we must not be surprised if the hair, together with its root, becomes deathly pale, dies off, and falls out. Herewith I claim to have recognized the reason for baldness and have shown the true way for its cure. I add that about 10 years ago, when I was afflicted with chronic inflammation of the kidneys, combined with a high degree of nervosity, my hair had become very gray and fell out. After having been cured from this serious disease by a dietetic treatment, I saw that, at the same time, the gray hairs disappeared, and that my hair grew into perfect profusion. If, therefore, the main cause of baldness lies in the disturbance of digestion and interchange of matter, it can certainly be cured by regulation of these functions. It can be said that even the absolutely bald heads may again take hope, on the basis of my discovery, after all the tonics have failed and must fail. The reason is that the cause is not external and therefore cannot be got at externally. Whoever sees his hair falling out, or whoever is already bald and wishes to regenerate in this direction, may apply to me for advice. There is no general internal remedy, and whoever has understood me will appreciate that individualization is necessary in every case. On the basis of the influence of my doctrine of diet on digestion and creation of blood, and therefore the correct nourishment of the hairbed, I can at least guarantee a standstill of the falling out of hair if my advices are followed correctly. Thus, all symptoms of aging are latent disease, accumulation of mucus, and clogging up by mucus. Everybody subjecting himself to a thorough restoring cure in case of any disease by parting with the dead cells through mucusless diet and eventually fasting rejuvenates himself simultaneously, and whoever submits to a rejuvenating cure deprives each and every disease of its foundation. Nobody wants to believe in this possibility. Yet, in each scientific dictionary, you will find the theory that at the worst one should die only of disturbance in the exchange of matter, i.e., constipation by mucus, so that life ought to end without any disease whatever. This would be the normal. But alas, the exception, the disease, has become the rule today. If anybody would live from childhood on absolutely mucusless food and feed on nothing but fruit, it would be just as certain that he could grow neither old nor sick. I have seen persons who through a mucusless cure have rejuvenated and become beautified to such an extent that they could not be recognized. Since thousands of years, humanity dreams, imagines, and paints the fountain of youth, and looks for it sentimentally to the stars in the suggestion. What is not being expended for remedies for masculine weakness and impotence, for sterility, of course, all in vain? And how easily could some people be helped, especially through correct and nourishing food, from the sun kitchen? We cannot imagine with what beauty and faculties the paradoic godlike man was gifted, what wonderful, strong, clear voice he had. The beautification and strengthening of the voice, yes, the winning back of the lost voice, is an amazing symptom in my cure, and an especially eloquent proof for the really grandiose effect of my system for the entire organism of the patient. I wish to refer here especially to the wonderful success of the cure submitted to by the Royal Bavarian chamber singer Heinrich Noth of Munich under my directions, whose voice had improved to the amazement of the entire musical world. Chapter 4. The Death. In the previous chapters, I have quoted the clogging up by mucus as being the reason for disease and aging. I have also proved the possibility of resubstitution of died-off cells. In view of the latter fact, it cannot be denied that the entire standstill of the human motor can be delayed for a long, long time if the body is being built up and maintained by living sun food from childhood on. At any rate, the body thus nourished is far ahead of that of the bad and all-eater, in that its building material is much more durable. In the right way of living, the exchange of matter takes place to a much lesser degree. Likewise, the stress on the inner organs, especially the heart and the stomach. In the performance of greatest efforts, the mucusless organism has not nearly the pulse frequency of a much eater. Merely through this saving of energy, it is possible to mathematically figure out and prove an advantage as regards longevity. But can we perhaps even solve this by all explaining mucus constipation, the last of all mysteries, death? In life-endangering injuries and afflictions, the brain and the heart are the organs whose disturbance of function finally ends with death. We can say that in most diseases, death takes place through additional development of heart stillness. As regards these, science has not by far spoken its last word, but we can say that the clogging up of the blood vessels of the heart and the destruction of the tender heart nerves through permanent repoisoning of the blood is the last cause of death in all chronic diseases. Likewise leads the clogging up of the tender blood vessels in the brain and an eventually bursting of same, apoplexy, as well as any other entire clogging up of vessels to a standstill of all functions of life. Of course, other circumstances play also a part in it, for instance, insufficient supply of air in case of disease of the lungs. Science also mentions the excessive appearance of the white blood corpuscles as the reason for death. This process of disease is regarded as a disease in itself and called leukemia, white-bloodedness, but better, in my opinion, more mucus than blood. Many other reasons are given for the cause of death. If, perchance, a disease cannot be put into any of the better defined registers, it is given the name of Kaczewski, which sounds very wise and means bad condition of nourishment, decay. I now ask, what is really the killing poison? Modern medical science gives the bacilli as the causes for most of the diseases, thus showing that it also has the idea of a common fundamental factor for all diseases, the aging and death, and, undoubtedly, a large part of all diseases and their consequences, death, are due to the bacilli. My experimental proof that mucus is the fundamental and main factor differs from the bacillus theory only in that just this mucus is the bed of the precondition, the primary. The excessive appearance of the white blood corpuscles, i.e. of the white dead mucus, as compared with the red, sugar, and iron substances, is becoming dangerous to life. Red-colored and sweet is the visible token of life and love. White, pale, colorless, bitter, the token of disease, and overwhelming by mucus, the slow dying away of the individual. The death struggle or agony can only be regarded as a last crisis, a last effort of the organism to excrete mucus, a last fight of the still living cells against the dead ones and their death poisons. If the white, dead cells, the mucus in the blood, gain the upper hand, there takes place not only a mechanical clogging up in the heart, but also a chemical reformation, a decline, a total poisoning, a sudden decay of the entire blood supply, and the machine stops short. It has pleased God Almighty. We bend our knees before the mysterious power of death. Thus we speak with resignation. Uncertainty is the only tragedy of life. There is none other, says Peter Altenberg in his Prodromes. Thus is also the last, the highest cause of all diseases, the aging and the death, at least if unnatural, a spiritual one, a not knowing, a sin which we have unconsciously committed and for which we are being punished undeservedly, but we are punished just the same. For in nature as well as in the civil book of laws, ignorance does not exempt from punishment. The purpose of this article is to contribute towards the good fight against ignorance, this trapdoor for so many poor men and women, and to spread knowledge which to the individual as well as to the people will be a blessing on body and spirit. The end. This has been Rational Fasting, Regeneration Diet, and Natural Cure for All Diseases, written by Arnold Ehret. This special edition for the audiobook edited by David DeAngelis in 2017 and narrated by Tom Chandler. Audiobook production copyright 2020 by David DeAngelis, all rights reserved worldwide.